Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and delighted to have in the studio, well, first of all, Patrick Doyle. He's always a delight because you never know what he's going to say. And he heads up Veritas Counseling, but he's brought with him a very special guest today, and I'm going to let our good buddy Patrick introduce Tony, but welcome both of you. But Patrick, how did you come to know Tony and introduce him?
Well, first of all, a friend of mine introduced me to his book, Neighbors and Wise Men.
Well,
and so I read the book in 2 days. Very enjoyable read. But what I discovered in the book was Tony has a great, amazing story, what God has brought him through and shown him. But in the book, what I found was a deep, passionate reality of the gospel. And I really was taken by it. I was taken by the story, what God has brought him through. And so then I was at a writers' conference several weeks ago, a month ago. Tony was a guest, a keynote speaker. And we had a conversation and talked about him coming and speaking at my church and then coming on theDove. And so here we are. But many folks in my congregation have read the book, and it's been very impacting. So I wanted to share it on a much broader reality, so here we are.
Well, Tony, nice to see you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Welcome to Southern Oregon.
It's great to be here.
I've heard nothing but fascinating stories, but I started reading the book late yesterday, so I'm not through it, and I'm fascinated with this whole journey of yours. It's called, by the way, for those who are listening and watching, called Neighbors and Wise Men, Sacred Encounters in a Portland Pub and Other Unexpected Places. And Tony's going to share with us your story, but before we get into that, give us a little bit of a background, because you were highly trained to go into ministry. Give us a little bit of background on you.
So thanks for letting me be here.
Yeah, you bet. Welcome.
So I'm an old Oregonian, so to speak. I'm fifth generation on both my dad's side and my mom's sides.
Wow.
And we have aunts and uncles all over the state. And I was born in Newburgh and raised in Eugene, where in the public school system, so I had 1 foot in this really liberal public school system and 1 foot in a very conservative Baptist church. And, that sort of dichotomy was just natural. When you're a kid, you don't know the difference.
Yeah, right.
And so I lived in that dichotomy sort of all my life, and it kind of just seemed normal to me. But I was also a kid who really I'm kind of wired for religion, and I'm also sort of wired to struggle. It's sort of the way God made me. And so nothing ever really came easy. I was always raising my hand, asking questions in Sunday school. I was kind of that kid.
Yeah.
And by the time I was in high school, I sort of had my first sort of crisis of faith. And really it was about, from the pulpit, the way the Christian life is described is this very sort of triumphal thing where every day is full of peace and joy and hope and purpose, and you know exactly what's going on, and God feels near. And inside, I didn't feel any of those things. And I thought there was something deeply broken in me. And no matter what I tried, I couldn't sort of get over that hump. And there's obviously a longer story to that. But by the time I went off to college, I didn't want anything to do with religion anymore. Because I sort of scraped and tried. And I went off to college, and I met the most interesting sort of little bohemian group of Jesus people at Oregon State University, of all places.
No.
I know. And this group of people were so, they were God's voice to me. They really were. They were the hound of heaven in my life. And they introduced me to sort of intimate prayer and just being together in prayer with one another. And then the other thing they introduced me to was this sort of deep fascination with the world and God's sort of love for the world. And so I don't know if you remember those Operation World books, that would explain every country of the world.
Right,
we would all carry those around in our backpacks every day. We'd pull them out over coffee, and we'd go through and find a new country we hadn't learned about. And we'd pray right there in the middle of the student commons together for that country. It just became this sort of the DNA of our life together. So when I was 21 years old with, my communications degree, newly minted in my pocket, 3.5 weeks out of college, I climbed on a plane and deciding I was going to go into the world and never return.
Oh.
And I flew, 21 years old, I flew to Albania, which in 1992 had just overthrown their communism, 50 years of really, really strict Stalinist communism.
Did you feel called there, or you just was?
Well, that's a whole nother story.
Let's start with A. What about Albania?
I'm saving the world. We'll start with A.
So 6 months before I left, I'm sitting in my apartment in Corvallis, Oregon, and I have this. I just need to go. I just need to go.
Wow.
So I pick up the phone and I call a Christian agency, missions agency. I get a lady on the phone.
Yeah.
And I said, hi, my name's Tony and I want to go into the world. She's like, okay. I said, so what's the greatest need in the world right now? She's like, I don't understand. I said, I think it's a simple question. You're a missions agency. I'm a guy who wants to go into missions. What's the greatest need in the world right now?
Wow.
And she's like, well, I just came out of a meeting and we're talking about Albania about a lot right now. And nobody seems to want to go.
Bye-bye.
And I said, okay, sign me up. Last name K-R-I. She's like, no, we don't do it that way. I'm like, what do you mean? No, you don't just decide on the phone where you're going to go. Like you pray about it and you seek, counsel and you do. I said, oh, well, I'll go do all those things, but for now, K-R, write me down, because I'm going to go. And 6 months later, I was on the plane, and that was it. I mean, the woman said, "There's the greatest need in the world. Why wouldn't I go to the greatest need in the world?"
Wow.
And so, so flew there when I was 21, and I arrived, and unbeknownst to me, the situation was set up where I was going to bunk with a Muslim family. I was going to rent a bed in their house.
Really?
And so here I am. I come into this world where I had always been taught that Muslims were the enemy, and suddenly my home and my new family was a Muslim family in Albania, and I spent the next 2 years eating 3 meals a day with them.
Wow.
And when I arrived, I didn't speak a word of Albanian, and the family didn't speak any English. The wife spoke just a little tiny bit, and the rest didn't speak any. So we would do 3 meals a day. We'd sit around. We would tell stories with no shared language every day.
That's awesome.
And it's, I mean, just amazing how many stories you can tell if you just are willing to sort of be really creative with your body and your face.
Yeah.
That's what we did. So.
Wow, that's fascinating. Did they know you were there for Christian purposes?
Absolutely. And they, honestly, they felt blessed by God that He would send a worker for God to their home. They said, they would say that to me all the time. We are thankful to Allah that someone who loves God and works for God would be sent to our home.
Wow.
Knowing fully well that I was a Christian and that I didn't read the Quran and I didn't follow the pillars of Islam.
How did you process that?
Well, first I didn't process it well. I did. I mean, I had been taught. I mean, I was very fearful when I went into their home. I was very critical, and I kept sort of an emotional, personal distance from them because I'm like, I can't let these people too close because I can't let them sort of poison me. Mm. And yet what happened was I walked in, and I tell the story, Neighbors and Wise Men, when I first walked in, and the man of the house walks up and he plants a big kiss on each of my cheeks.
Yeah.
When I first walked in, as if to say, you're part of our family now. And the level of love, particularly the grandmother in the household, just became a real sort of beacon of affection and embrace, and she just cared for me every day of my life. And even though sometimes it was frustrating, and again, there are some stories about just Albanian superstition and how I didn't handle it real well. But you couldn't deny the really transcendent affection that I received. And as somebody who doesn't come from a particularly affectionate family, especially on my dad's side, and I didn't really have grandparents, I only had really one grandparent, and she wasn't a particularly affectionate person. She's a wonderful lady, but not affectionate. That was very transformative.
So did this, it must have really affected you from your Christian experience. You're going in, you're being received with love, incredible transparency.
Yeah.
And all your Christian training says, this is a no-no. You're not supposed to be
right.
here. What did it do to your head?
It really did mess with me. And I mean, I had, it caused some anxiety over a good year and a half. And I think the anxiety climaxed one day. I walked on campus. I worked mostly on campus. I was working with a university-based mission group. And I walked on campus to find 2 Muslim evangelists, like scholarly, long woolen robes, woolen hats, long beards, well articulating, standing out in the middle of the square, explaining the gospel of Islam to a huge crowd of students. And that was fairly normal. I mean, it was a Muslim country. We would see things like this regularly, but this was, for some reason, was really palatable to me. And so I walk on and I see these folks standing there, and I go and I get in the crowd and I listen to them, and they're very inspiring. And the students are obviously very moved. And they weren't just inspiring them around faith, but they were inspiring their nationalism as well. And God has chosen Albania to be a light of Islam in Europe, you know, and all that kind of language. And I walked away really scared, like, this is bad, and somebody needs to stand up. And then all sort of my college training, my Campus Crusade training sort of like clicked in, and I was like, I got to slay the giant. You know, the whole like, like David and Goliath like metaphor. Like I got to slay the giant. Who's gonna go? Who will choose the smooth stones? If not you, then whom? And I was like, oh. So I went and I went and talked to my pastor, and I really prayed about it. And the next day I'm walking on campus, and you know, I'm just walking on campus, I'm probably singing to myself like I often do because I'm kind of a singer. And so I'm walking up on campus, and it's just a falling apart campus. All the roads have just eroded and fallen apart, and the basketball stadium is all just broken down, and the backboards have rotted and fallen over. It's just, I mean, it's post-communism. It's the so I'm walking up this little dirt trail up onto campus, and I kind of turn, and then like I feel this sort of like group behind me as I'm walking, like, and I sort of half look over my shoulder. I realize it's the two Muslim evangelists and their sort of cadre of people walking right behind me, a couple of steps. And I turn around and I'm like, what's going on? And they walked up to me, and I said, stop! I'm a follower of Jesus. Like, because I was like, I have to be the one who's going to stand up. Yeah. And we ended up getting in this conversation that afternoon, and they ended up being the most gracious, encouraging, blessing, and actually taught me something about ministry that I hadn't learned from my Christian background.
All right, I want you to share what that is.
All right.
All right, we'll be right back. Hold on, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
We're all sitting on the edge of our seats ready to go to stage 2 here. Tony Kriz is with us today. He's authored a fascinating book, Neighbors and Wise Men, Sacred Encounters in a Portland Pub. We're going to go there, and other unexpected places. And Tony's whole story is just fascinating. So he's a young missionary student in Albania in the middle of a Muslim campus thinking that he has to stand up and defend Jesus. And the fact that he's here tells you he lived through it. So what happened? You got us right on the edge.
All right, so,
you're a worshiper of Jesus.
So I'm walking on campus, and
Yes.
these Muslim evangelists, he's very regal, middle-aged, obviously very scholarly, very intelligent. They have that ethos and pathos. It's intimidating, you know? And I turn around and I say, I'm a missionary for Jesus. Yeah. And they looked at me. I remember the first words they said, that is wonderful. We love Jesus. He is the most honorable of prophets. And I was like, oh no, you're going to steal all my thunder. Like, I want you to come back at me so I can fight or something.
Or your theological training just came right to the service.
And then they said, young missionary, how are you in your time here in Albania? And I said, they asked how I am, and I said, our work is going very well, thank you. God is doing many things through us.
Wow.
Right? So I turned I turned it into a work thing. They asked about me, and I turned it into a work thing. And then I, of course, foolishly softballed it back. How is your work going? So they said, we do no work at all. Because we know that it's not about us or our words, that it is God who's at work in the world. And we just have the privilege of walking along and watching what God does.
Oh, wow.
And that idea crystallized in that way I had never heard anyone say before, because there was so much put on sort of the manifestation of the individual to make things happen. And so much of my story, being an old pioneer kid, pioneer roots, was to make things happen. And this idea was the first time this idea that really I don't have to make things happen, that it's God who's doing things. And it's God's delight to invite me into what he's doing. And that was very transformative. It started to change the way I thought about ministry.
Did you go into this mission work somewhat with sharp elbows? I mean,
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I'm an opinionated fella.
No. But okay, so you were pretty legalistic in your stance, huh?
I was pretty. I don't know if I'd use legalism specifically, but I was very clear on the answers. Like we like to say, I knew the answer before the question was asked.
Okay.
Often, and so.
Yeah. All right. So somewhere along the line, it all fell apart for you.
Yeah.
What happened?
So Albania ended up being like a phenomenal experience. It was like a missionary biography, seeing people come to faith literally every day in the 2 years I was there. And our little cadre kind of got identified as kind of superstars a little bit, which was a death sentence for me with the way that I'm wired and my ego. And so I started being a guy that was sent into new places to get things started on behalf of my missions agency. So I kept being stuck in different sort of hot spots around the Balkans and the Middle East to start things.
And then they get you out of town, huh?
Yeah, and I've been evacuated. I've been involved in 2 State Department evacuations.
Really?
In my story.
Wow.
So because of terrorism.
Right here, get the book. Okay.
So it is. It's literally that sort of stuff, and often going alone, which was also a death sentence. But my individualism was out of control, and I volunteered to go alone, and then my agency loved guys like me.
Wow.
Who just want to go.
Yeah.
And so through that thing in 7 day a week, 16-hour a day working, not taking days off, having a high sense that it's on me, language learning, avoiding secret police, crossing borders, all that kind of stuff. Eventually led to just cosmic burnout by the time I was 28, 29 years old. And I actually got to the point that it felt like my soul no longer functioned. I couldn't pray. I couldn't even really imagine life with God. My Bible was absolutely gibberish. It just looked like Sanskrit to me. And I sat in that for a year as a leader on the mission field with many teams under me.
No, wait, you're a missionary leading people to Christ, and you're burned out.
Totally burned out. Don't even know if I can believe.
Did you know you lost your faith?
I couldn't put words to it. Depression is like that, or burnout is like that. I couldn't put words to it, but I knew that I was responsible, and maybe even my destiny depended upon that I fight through it and continue to claw and scrape my way through each day. But I was a walking cancer. Anger, manipulation, hurting people. It was horrible. My next book, I get into that even more, about the manipulation and the pain that I caused. And so eventually my missions agency goes, hey, we are not sure you actually believe anymore. I was like, yes, thank you for noticing. And they're like, we're not sure you can be a missionary anymore. And so I learned that actually you're not allowed to be a missionary if you don't believe. I learned that.
What a thought.
What a thought. And so I got fired. I got yanked out of the field.
They throw you under the bus, or they take care of you?
Well, so I got, longer story.
Yeah.
Chapter 10. So I end up in Budapest for 6 months, sort of waiting for my judgment to come down, living in this little one-room apartment by myself. And
you're not praying?
I'm not praying.
You're not reading your Bible? You're not
struggling. And eventually, after 6 months of just being alone and waiting, and missions agencies have a lot of priorities, and a broken missionary is way down the list of priorities. And so it took them 6 months to kind of decide, we're going to send you home and send you to seminary, because a slow drip of theology is exactly what your ailment needs. And so I got sent back to Portland, and I went to seminary in Portland, and for 3 years I sat and studied theology in order to figure out what was broken inside me.
Boy, this opens so much, because I can't help but think, whether you're on the foreign mission field or you're serving in a church, or you're just Mr. Wonderful Christian person sitting on a large ministry board, you're suffering with this.
Yes. And the pressure to keep it hidden is so strong. I feel like we are a lot more content often in religious circles to encourage people to pretend than to actually deal with what is awfully complicated faith. And yet it's in those complications where I think our wholeness really comes if we are willing to engage it, and if we have a culture, faith culture, where there is space for complicated. And seminary was great people, great professors, but that in that place they weren't comfortable with my sort of tension.
Why did you even want to stay in seminary?
I didn't. I tried to leave every semester, I assure you. I did. I said, this is my last semester, every semester.
Somebody's looking out for you.
And at the end of each semester, for whatever reason, I was like, I think, and a lot of it's my dad taught me not to quit. It's a very huge part of who I am. You never quit, right?
Okay.
And so at the end of each semester, I go, okay, I'll stay for one more, but this is the last one. This is the last time I'm going to stay. And what it did, and I think what it did was, it provided a season. It provided a 3-month season with a little bit of control on it, keeping me because I'm a runner by nature.
Okay.
Give me a backpack and $100 in my pocket, and I'm gone. Right?
Albania.
it kept me rooted in one place for 3 years because there were things that God did want to do, and the places where God's work happened was in a pub, where I would go to write my theology papers, breaking seminary policy.
So you're in a pub, going to seminary,
right?
Sipping some adult beverages, writing a theology paper.
Writing theology papers.
This is really cool.
pretty much every afternoon.
Really?
And it was sitting at that table at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the sort of non-religious ragamuffins that hang out in a British-style pub at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon are the sorts of people that God sent into my life. And they were willing to just sit and listen. They didn't want to fix me. They didn't have the immediate answers.
Well, did they know who you were? Of course not.
No. Oh, well, they did, because I told them my whole story. I told them about my pain and my brokenness, and I didn't know what to do. I would say, I'm not sure if I believe anymore. I'm not sure if I should just chuck Christianity and Jesus completely. And they would sit and they would just listen. They go, tell me more. Sometimes for an hour, they would just sit and listen to me explain my pain and my experience. And at the end, often they would go, you sound like somebody who deep down inside really believes. I think you should stay with God.
Right.
Really?
Over and over again. They were the ones who kept bumping me back into the game.
That is absolutely fascinating. What did you... Well, let me fast forward and come back. Did you have a moment where it broke again for you?
No moment.
Okay.
It was the
gradual.
slow work of mercy in my life.
And God used people in a pub to do that?
Pub and a place called Reed College in Portland, Oregon, which is widely considered the most godless college in all of America, according to Princeton Review.
Really?
And I stumbled onto Reed College. I became the volunteer chaplain for 3 years, where I still wasn't sure what I believed. And those crazy...
Well, you didn't know what you believed, you become chaplain.
You got to understand, it's Reed College.
That qualified you there.
It qualified me. And we started a community of faith there. There was one going, and we, myself and a fellow named Donald Miller, wrote a book called Blue Like Jazz.
Yeah, right.
I invited him to come along, and he hung out for a while. And that little cadre, and I mean, we had Jews and Buddhists and pagans and atheists involved in our little community of faith, where we talked about Jesus every time we got together, read the Bible every time we got together.
I got to take a break. I want to come back to something, because I think I'm sensing it beginning to surface here. And that's when you were in Albania, and the Muslim missionary basically said, we're here to do nothing but to see God. Am I quoting that right?
Yeah, it's not our work, it's God's work.
It's God's work.
We get to witness it.
And that's, now you're seeing this in another form? Is that part of your...
Finally coming 8 years later, I'm starting to understand what they meant.
Interesting. All right, we'll be back just a moment here.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Okay, we're back, and absolutely fascinating time today. Patrick Doyle has brought to the studio Tony Kriz, and he has authored this book. And let me encourage you to get a copy of it. It's called Neighbors and Wise Men, Sacred Encounters in a Portland Pub and Other Unexpected Places, put out by Thomas Nelson. I'm sure you can check it out at the bookstores, online at Amazon, or check it out at Barnes & Noble. Fascinating story. And if you're in ministry and you may think you are burned out, read this book. If you're doing more out of duty than you are out of passion, you need to read this book, okay? And that's the story we're involved in. All right, he's come from Albania, he loses his faith, he's a chaplain at a college and he doesn't know what he believes. I mean, this is unbelievable. He's sitting in a bar drinking booze and writing his theological papers. Okay, well, God
just
can
like
use
C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien and Martin Luther. I'm in good company.
Okay, you go back to some of these guys that smoke cigars and pipes, and they wrote great stuff. I'm not here to do all that, but I want to come back to early on. You begin to realize, full circle, 8 years later, I think you said, that the Muslim evangelist said something now that was going to come up in your life.
Yeah.
What is that?
So, Reed College in particular. So we had this scrappy group. It grew to a few dozen people, and maybe 8 of us would self-identify as followers of Jesus on any level, and the rest were just co-journeyers, and they liked the questions we were asking. And they felt like our little fellowship was a great place to ask questions like, why are we here? What is God like? What does it mean to be, why am I so broken? Why is the world so broken? What does it look like to experience healing? What does forgiveness feel like? Why do we need conversion? Why is Jesus such a powerful character in human history? What is the hope of the world? What do we think about heaven? So these were sort of questions. We would open up the questions in sort of a boardroom style. Everybody share your thoughts, and then we would end with a little homily about something from the story of God's people. I would show an Eastern Orthodox icon, or we would tell a story from church history, or we would pull out a story from the life of Jesus. So we just kind of go, this kind of gives some clues, I think. Because Jesus, so most of these students weren't ready to say Jesus is the Son of God is the only way. So we want to introduce the idea that Jesus is the most interesting voice in human history in the affairs of life, faith, and purpose. So in that room, listening to these folks, I just found, literally there were so many days, and chapter 3 of the book is all about Reed College, where these students, ragamuffin students, not Christians, right, have never gone to church, they would say things, theological ideas, that I would go, that is so God. And then I'm watching all the rest of the students around the circle go, yes. Really? And I'm watching conversion happen, maybe not in the ultimate sense, but in the sense that we all had to take steps towards God.
You're changing the thinking.
Yeah. So fascinating stuff.
Wow. All right. So you went on, you got your doctorate's degree.
I did, yeah. Yeah. Several years later, I went on to get my doctorate.
Did you believe then?
It depends upon the hour sometimes, but no, yes.
And how are we doing right now?
I'm in. I'm in with you, Perry.
I just want to know if I'm going to finish this interview or not. This is absolutely fascinating. What, Tony, have you learned from this? Have we put God in a box? Are we Christians missing it big time? And I don't want to come down on the church. Right. I love the church.
Me
Jesus
too.
loved the church. And
Me too.
I'm into this, and this is what we do here with broadcasting. But at the same time, the world knows what we're against. Few know what we're for.
Yeah.
And are we willing to get outside the box to reach people?
Yeah. Yeah. So to that point, and I agree with you. When you're like me and you surf in the world of writers and speakers, and you guys working in broadcasting know, if you want to get your name on the board, you have really extreme and caustic opinions.
Right.
And it's just a world I'm not willing to go to, especially in regards to the church, my brothers and sisters. I don't want to play any of those cheap trick games. I believe the church is beautiful. I believe, as Augustine said, that she is a whore and she's also my mother. But I do believe that she is my mother. And so as far as the idea, I'm absolutely convinced that God is moving throughout the world, at all places, at all times. And our sense of limiting God happens every day. Jesus is a fascinating example, of course. As he walks through his life, he's constantly drawing from folks from very, very diverse backgrounds and even embracing the things that they said. He looked at a centurion who, there's nothing in the text to say he's not a pagan, idolater, a pluralist, and it says Jesus marveled at his great faith. And it's there's the only time Jesus ever marveled at anything in a positive way. Jesus marvels at lack of faith before, but it's the only time he marvels. There's only one person Jesus ever says, your faith is great. It's the Canaanite woman. Religious, spiritual, cultural outsider. Class outsider from a different class, right? That's your faith is great. Jesus was baptized by an outlaw. Jesus head was anointed by a woman of questionable repute. Jesus when he was thirsty, he received water from a woman who was a cultural and religious outsider. When Jesus was exhausted, he received a boat from some unknown Galilean in order to get away and escape. Like, he was constantly receiving from people from very, very different backgrounds. Jesus was inspired by people from different backgrounds. In his first sermon in Luke chapter 4, Jesus picks out two heroes, a widow of Sidon and a leper from Syria. Two cultural and religious outsiders as the heroes of his first sermon in Luke chapter 4. And Jesus' most famous work of fiction, parable, the Good Samaritan. Who's the hero that he chooses? A religious and cultural outsider as the person that we should want to be like, or somebody who got the way of Jehovah in that story. And so one of the reasons I wrote the book was to kind of go, look, I can't deny that throughout my story, these unexpected voices have been the conduit of God's work in my life. Now, how we work out our theology of whether they know that they're the conduit or not, that's a whole nother question, but they're clearly the conduit. It was true in Jesus' life, and it's been true throughout my life, particularly in my pain.
Boy, there's so many questions here, and it's a little time. We did a fair amount of research here at theDove before we took on this television project 4 or 5 years ago, generational science, and we did some neuromarketing research. And out of that came some interesting statistics. One was that 85% of the average person sitting in an American church today is burned out, hopeless, tired, and they actually are questioning their relationship with Christ. 85%. And the world is looking at this 85% and going, if it's not working for you, it ain't working for me. And what we found out from that is that most people will come to Christ through a smaller group of like-minded people, thinkers, or motorcycles, or fishing groups, or whatever,
Right.
and they'll incubate there before they finally move back into a church.
Right.
But it's a sad testimony that 85% sitting in the churches today are hurting people. Now, you can identify with that. And what have you learned from your experience? What could you say to that person that's sitting in that pew going, I don't understand why it's not working for me.
Yeah.
I believe the Bible. I believe in Jesus. I read the miracles. I see all this stuff. I pray, nothing happens. And in fact, if you look at the Christian community today and the culture, we're not changing anything. If anything, we're going backwards. What can you say? What do you say?
So I wouldn't call it a crisis of faith on the level of what I experienced as a missionary. My most recent sort of crisis happened last year when my 4-year-old nephew, when he was 3, he contracted a very, very wicked form of cancer. And we had to deal with this child, this innocent child who's suffering unbelievably. Chemo, radiation, pain. And I can remember sitting in their Oklahoma home and looking at him and just imagining the sense of loneliness and isolation he was feeling as everything he's going through, no one else can relate to, and yet he's so small. He doesn't have the categories to process it or explain it to people around him. I can remember just sitting there going, God, I don't even know if I have the faith to ask you to heal him. I want you to. But I do want you to be with him. I want him to know you're near. I want him to feel that he's not alone. God loves him in the midst of this. And that actually is what inspired the book that's coming out here in a few months, called Aloof, Figuring Out Life with a God Who Hides.
Wow.
So my nephew sort of commissioned me to go on this journey of processing what you're talking about, what the person in the pew is feeling, processing it. And I start with my nephew, and then I start when I'm 4 years old and my first suspicious encounter with God. And I go up through my life and I sort of process theologically what's going on. Because I think we are asking that question, and there's not good vocabulary for people for two reasons. One, the most insidious reason, is the social pressure in religious circles to look good and thus pretend. And so we encourage people, we actually have a reward system
Exactly.
to hide the things that make me look clumsy, dirty, unsure, out of control, not with the answers. Any of those things, doubt, pain, brokenness, any of those things, we have social pressure. We have a reward system. You will be accepted. You have good answers. And if you raise your hands and sing in the right way, and if you do these things, you have, well, there are social rewards. So that's the first really insidious thing. So the first piece would be, we have to stop pretending. We have to bring our story. It doesn't have to be catastrophic. That's another thing, but so often it's like when we reach the bottom of the well, it's the first time we start talking about it. As you're clawing on the way down, just talk about it. To talk about, so with my nephew, other parts of my life I wasn't experiencing doubt necessarily, but with that I was. So I need to talk about that piece of it with my community, with my friends, and with people outside the church. I'd never know what they might have to say that might help me, where they might be the conduits of God's voice in my life. So I have the courage to bring everything into the light. I just think things in the shadows are always more dangerous. Bring everything into the light. Right. And we need to have a church culture where we celebrate bringing things into the light.
Yes.
Shadows are always dangerous. Shadows is not the place of the Spirit. I'm just convinced. That's the one piece. And then, corporately, collectively, we need to help each other have language to explain it. Because most people don't even know how to describe what they're feeling. Like your experience.
Control.
But from your research, they're sitting in the pew and they don't even know how to explain what's going on because because the pastor up front who has it figured out.
It's easier to sit there and live into this pain and discomfort than it is to fight against it. The peer pressure of fighting.
Right.
Yeah. Let me take one more break.
Okay.
And I want you to bring this in for a landing. I'm going to let you preach for 11 minutes. So get your sermon ready. We'll be right back with Tony in just a moment.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
All right, we're back, and fascinating time with our very special guest today, Tony Kriz, and he's here as a guest of Patrick Doyle, and they have become buds. And so I want to say, Patrick, thanks for bringing Tony in.
Absolutely.
You know, Tony, I can tell already we're going to have to Skype you in more often.
Let's do it.
You know, I think you have a lot to say to hurting Christians that are hiding behind this mask of Christianity when inside it's not working for them. And I think they need to be comfortable with the fact, okay, it's okay that it's not working. Let's get through this and get you to a place, because you went through this several times in your life.
Yeah.
And went on, got his PhD. What is it in? Theology? What's your PhD
Spiritual
in?
formation.
Spiritual formation. Well, there's one. What's that mean? You're
That's
a
another
doctor
show.
of what?
That's another show. Let's pencil it in.
Anyway, this is a great book. Neighbors and Wise Men.
Yeah.
And let me encourage you to check it out. Put out by Thomas Nelson. Check it out at Evangel or Barnes & Noble or online at Amazon. All right. In fact, I want you to just kind of go there. What do you say to a person? I think there's incredible pressure on the average churchgoer today to be somebody and to do something. I heard a sermon several months ago, Kings and Priests, and it was to businessmen, that it's okay, God can use you in business. as a businessman to support the work of the ministry, and it relaxed a lot of guys because a lot of guys think, well, I need to go out and become a missionary or something. You know, it's okay where God's got you. But the average person, 85% sitting in the church today are hurting. God's not. It doesn't seem to be working for them, and yet they can quote the scripture and tell everybody else how to live, but it's not working for them. Preach it. What would you say?
I'm actually not sure how many can quote the scriptures anymore. So I'm a professor at Warner Pacific College in Portland. It's a great school. I love the vision of the school, but I'm amazed at how biblically illiterate our upcoming generation is. It's really shocking to me. I mean, me being raised in a liberal town, Eugene, Oregon, liberal school system, and boy, I never would have been allowed to get through Sunday school with the extreme lack of just biblical knowledge, love of the Bible that I'm witnessing a lot in the next generation. I love my students. They're fantastic. Very insightful in many ways, but as far as biblical knowledge, so that's also another piece of the problem, is we're not talking about the Bible enough. We're not, and I'm not just talking about from the pulpit. I'm talking about at a coffee shop and sharing the stories in the ways that they speak to us, sharing the thoughts in the ways that they speak to us. We've become so addicted to sort of having our own thoughts. You know, this individualistic culture. So many of my peers, they want to become intuitive theologians overnight, and they're not willing to do just the hard work of study and prayer, meditation,
so they
fasting.
cut and paste it, huh?
No, even worse. They create bad conceptual art out of their own imagination. I know that's one of the things we have to deal with in our shrink-wrapped, social media infused culture. We have to deal with this. And
is there a hunger for truth?
Well, there's always a hunger for truth. I mean, the human heart longs for it. But the thing that I believe keeps us from the pursuit of truth is love of the stomach, our desire for entertainment. I think we have a culture that's numbing its way through. Children are sitting in front of video games, and you know, I don't want to be overly extreme. I don't want to be that guy, but there is sort of consumerism, commuterism, comfort, entertainment. These have become our virtues, and I just fear that our souls are not well fed. That we have sort of a cotton candy diet, and so when the questions come, people, they literally they don't know where the heck to go, and they feel lost, and I feel lost. So that's part of it. I think that's part of it. But
how did you process your nephew? Did he make it?
He did not. Matter of fact, today is the 1-year anniversary of his death. So we're heavy-hearted today.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
5 years old?
He was 4 when he died.
4 when he died.
Yeah. He would be 5.
It just seems so. God, why?
Why?
How do you process that?
Not well.
Okay.
Not well. I mean, in the sense that part of me. So, what is faith? And on some level, my best action of faith is to take that question and set it on my eternal shelf. Go, God, let's make sure we get to that when the time comes, because I don't have a category for it. I don't have a category for a 4-year-old that suffers for the last year and a half of his life and dies. I don't have a category for that. I don't have a category for little girls on the other side of the world that are sold into slavery and put in brothels. I don't have a category for little boys in Africa that are sold to be soldiers and are given automatic weapons. I don't have a category for that. I don't have a category for famine. I don't have a category for these things. I don't have a category. And if I believe God truly, I have to believe God in those things, as well as my kumbaya experiences, my praise meeting experiences, I love my Bible experiences, this is my new favorite book experiences. I have to believe God in both of those places. On some level, I have to exercise faith and go, I trust a person, not my answers.
Yeah.
And religious culture teaches us to trust answers, that I have the right answers to the questions. And I don't think we're called to believe in our answers. We're called to believe in a person, an abiding person. Because if we only believe in the answers and correcting one another, we really just believe in an ideology.
Yeah.
We don't believe what I would argue is true faith.
You got to be careful you don't lose your passion,
Yeah.
because when you see those situations and you realize, all right, you can't change it, then you may give up trying to change it.
So the other side of the coin
Yeah.
is we may have the most revolutionary generation in recent years, in recent generations coming up through. Kids that want to be involved in issues, they want to throw their lives into the fire. If they would just be given the chance, if they would be given the redemptive imagination to throw themselves into the pain of our world.
Well, you know, it's interesting because part of our research shows that the millennials, if you want to call them a name, will drop everything and go.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I have to hear the same sermon 3 or 4 times. They only need to hear it once, and they'll drop everything. The average age of those who responded to Haiti after that horrible earthquake was 21.
Yeah.
So there seems to be a sense, yeah, I get it, and I'll go. I want to serve more than I want to be wrapped up in committee meetings, right?
Right.
You know, I'd rather go do it than sit in a church and be told how to live.
Right.
Does that make sense?
For sure.
And you're teaching college, are you sensing that?
Yes, for sure. That when they get bumped, right, they need to get bumped out of that consumer entertainment comfort pattern that they're locked into, they're addicted to. They can get bumped out of that, and often crisis is what does it.
Right.
Crisis across the world, crisis in their town. They have their first real conversation with a neighbor who lives outside, who lives in the elements. And that's it. That's the thing that bumps them, is suddenly their life gets radically changed.
I only got a couple seconds left. Where do you think, what do you think, it's a big question and not enough time, but what do you think God has taken the church today? What should we be doing? Because it seems like it's hurting people all around us. We can just stop and begin to minister today. We can stop and help people. Are we willing to help those that otherwise we'd walk past? I mean,
Exactly. So, Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
Right? There's an older demon who is giving instruction to a younger demon. Right? The younger demon's having a lot of problems with his patient, his human patient that he's supposed to be like manipulating. Right? And in I think it's book 6. I think it's book 6. The older demon says to the younger demon, "There's nothing you can do. There will always be a certain amount of malice and a certain amount of benevolence in your patient. The important thing is to keep the benevolence focused on things all the way across the world, and his malice focused on the people he sees every day.
Whoa, I forgot about that.
Therefore,
Therefore.
the malice will be wholly real to him, and the benevolence will be virtual or imaginary. So where do we start? We start in our neighborhood. We start by parking our cars and starting to walk. We start by knowing the names of all of our neighbors. We start by going to local businesses that have a chance to be owned by my neighbors so I can interact with them in more places than just structured religious contexts. We stop being commuters, where we can climb in our car and change our personality and change our dress to become something and pretend I'm one person at work and another person at church and another person where I recreate and another person where I educate. To stop that, we have to become whole people. We have to allow our neighbors to see us both in our struggles and in our triumphs.
Right.
We need to live, I think we need to live close.
Yeah.
Inviting people into our home, being around the dinner table with people very different than we are, believing that anybody can be God's voice in my life, and maybe I could be God's voice to them.
Well, that is the essence of what he writes about here. Neighbors and Wise Men. I get a copy of it. Sacred Encounters in a Portland Pub and Other Unexpected Places. And if you're feeling the weight of it, maybe you feel a little burned out, you feel the pressure to be something that you're not, this book will help you relax and get on with life. Tony, you are an inspiration, and I'd love to do some more series with you, and then you can use the video and do what you need to do, whatever God leads you to do. Thanks for coming in. Good to see you.
This has been great.
You know, that's the best I ever had you on the air.
It's the time I said the least.
Folks, history was made today. Patrick said nothing. He didn't have any answers, any suggestions. It was a great show with Patrick Doyle. He'll be back sometime in the future, too. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim, and I work at theDove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, theDove.us.